Ah, yes, the annual tradition that we have every single offseason where we decide if T. Higgins is a really good, undervalued football player or slightly overrated for what he brings to the table. Well, what we're trying to figure out here is would he fit on the Houston Texans should he become a free agent? Put an asterisk next to that. We'll get to that point in the price portion. As always, the player, the price to get that player, and ultimately the verdict thumbs up or thumbs down on if the Texans should be pursuing this player. Let's talk about former Cincinnati Bengals, maybe former Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver T. Higgins, 26 years old this upcoming season. Last year, he was the best version of himself. And I know what you're saying, hey, 73 yards or 73 receptions and 911 receiving yards, that doesn't seem like a lot. Surely he's had better seasons. And statistically, he has. He's gone over 1,000 two times previously in his career. He had 10 touchdowns last year, though, for the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, Jamar Chase got a lot more volume than T. Higgins, but T. Higgins was still very, very good. He was a top 10 player in Pro Football Focus's receiving grades. He was a top 10 receiver in their offensive grading. In catch rate over expected, he was a top 20 player. And as far as value added as a wide receiver, he was 12th in the NFL in value added at the wide receiver position. He was the best version of himself last year for the Cincinnati Bengals. He was the best version of himself in the NFL up to this point. And how would he fit with the Houston Texans? Well, it's pretty obvious to see how he fits. He's been Robin to Batman. It'd be like having Batman and Robin again in Houston. Nico Collins is the better wide receiver, but T. Higgins is a guy that you have to give attention to. You have to pay attention to T. Higgins, and you have to account for him if you're an opposing offense, especially if there's another dangerous wide receiver on the field. Now, for the Texans, that'd be incredible to have Nico Collins and T. Higgins. That'd be one of the more physically gifted wide receiver duos from a size perspective that you would think about across the entire NFL. It'd be great. The big worry I'd have from a player fit, you see down there, 10 games missed total over the past 2 seasons. That doesn't account for games where T. Higgins was active, but the injury restricted him, or games where he was active, played a little bit, and then left. T. Higgins is a frequently injured player. When you start to think about frequently injured players with Nico Collins, who is a frequently injured player, and it becomes a little much to digest if you're the Houston Texans and you're thinking about T. Higgins. So really good player, really productive player, about to be the best version of himself. That's all nice, but how do you get T. Higgins? The price to get T. Higgins? Expensive, very expensive if he's a free agent, even more expensive if he gets franchise tagged. Look, T. Higgins is coming off of a franchise tag for the Cincinnati Bengals. That means he had a fully guaranteed contract with big money. And if he gets franchise tagged again, that means that he would have to be traded for. That's either the exclusive franchise tag or the non-exclusive franchise tag. If Higgins gets tagged again, then not only do you have to pay T. Higgins, which is going to be very expensive, probably $25 million a year or more, but you also have to trade for T. Higgins. And that non-exclusive franchise tag, that's at least 2 first-round picks to start the conversation. Now, if he's franchise tagged, you could still negotiate with Cincinnati a trade. You could pay less than those 2 first-rounders and ultimately sign him to a contract once you get him via trade. But I'm almost not interested at all, and I'll go ahead and tell you thumbs down if there's any sort of franchise tag involved with T. Higgins. You just can't go about giving up draft capital that it would take to get T. Higgins. Certainly not 2 first-round picks. Certainly not a first-round pick. And I would tell you, for the player and the production and the availability, you can't even really give up a second-round pick and go out there and pay a guy like T. Higgins. That would be a bit of roster mismanagement by the Houston Texans if they were able to do that. Now, the franchise tag is not guaranteed by any means. I know there's been some whispers and rumors that he's going to get the tag. But if Cincinnati doesn't tag him, well, he's headed to wide open free agency. And that's where it becomes a little easier to understand. But then again, the price tag is at the very least $23 million a year, but you're probably looking at $25 million a year and then some, a good portion of that guaranteed as well. Guys like T. Higgins don't always hit free agency, but when they do, they are expensive. So you're paying top of the free agent market to go out there and get T. Higgins if he is a true free agent. And that's if he hits true free agency, because that franchise tag does ultimately loom. So that's the player, the price. What's the verdict on T. Higgins? I'm not just a thumbs down. I'm 2 thumbs down on this one. I've got no interest in T. Higgins. He's hurt far too much. He's going to get paid like a number 1 wide receiver when he's never proven that he could be a number 1 wide receiver. If he gets franchise tagged, it becomes nearly impossible to pay the price to go and get T. Higgins. I just don't see him as a fit for the Houston Texans whatsoever. If you want a player of that caliber, you're better off signing a guy like Chris Godwin, who has played more games in recent years. I know the ankle injury last year than T. Higgins, has been more consistently productive than a guy like T. Higgins. You're better off trading for somebody that's not going to cost as much from a draft pick perspective or a money perspective. And if you really want a top-end wide receiver from a trade perspective, you could find players better than T. Higgins that would cost less than T. Higgins in the scenario that you're trying to go and get him with that franchise tag. 2 thumbs down, not interested whatsoever. Wasn't interested a year ago before Cincinnati put the franchise tag on him. Still not interested a year later when he could be a free agent. Certainly still not interested if the franchise tag gets applied to T. Higgins. Am I way off? Did the Bengal change his stripes? Let me know in the comment section down below. On your way down there, throw me a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out the other free agency videos. We've talked about Chris Godwin, also talked about Trey Smith, the offensive guard from the Kansas City Chiefs, and then I got a bargain player out there for you, another video that you can check out. There'll be plenty more of these free agent videos. And there's always going to be content over on the SNL channel where myself and Landry Locker from the Locker Room get together and talk about the Houston Texans. Plenty of content there, plus the Locker Room each and every day and night here on YouTube as well. Be live from the NFL Scouting Combine next week, where teams will be looking to find the next T. Higgins, who's going to be much, much cheaper and hopefully far more durable. Don't want to miss out on any of the content live from the Scouting Combine. The draft is one of my favorite things, and the Combine is one of the biggest parts of the draft. You don't want to miss out on that. Plenty more coming about that later in the week, and, of course, we'll be in Indianapolis next week. Appreciate you watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you're a T. Higgins fan, you maybe didn't enjoy it. I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.